Literary houses are like the Disneyland of literature.
I get the attraction of writers' houses. It's the thing you do when you're extraordinarily bored. Has that been your experience, though, in going to writers' houses? Like, do you have the
You know what? My experience is like, God, some of these writers rich.
This is Dead Writers, a show about great American authors and where they lived.
I'm Tess Wilson.
And I'm Brock Clark.
A decade ago, I became obsessed with saving Harriet Beecher Stowe's house in Maine. Then I did save it, but I'm still obsessed with literary houses, and not just Stowe's.
I wrote a novel called An Arsonist's Guide to Writers' Homes in New England because I couldn't figure out why anyone goes to writers' homes, let alone tries to save them.
You'd think I'd hate Brock.
But you're my colleague. You can't hate me.
It's true. That would be awkward.
So instead of hating each other, we made this show.
It doesn't feel like spring. Portland is freezing with icy winds cutting through our bones. But it is the end of March, officially spring, and time to wake up the Henry Wadsworth-Longfellow house out of its winter sleep. Inside the house, the radiators are sputtering to life, but the original 19th century furniture is still sleeping, covered with protective white sheets. I feel like it's going to turn into Casper in front of the
Yeah, right. I feel like there should be a ta-da.
Yeah, I know, right? And then we'll just fold it.
And here's the table.
And then
That's free.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Vivian Cunningham is its historic housekeeper, or as they formally refer to her, the Collections and Visitor Services Assistant. And Abby Zoldowski is its collections manager. They're carefully folding up the white sheets and gently dusting the surfaces underneath. So there's one more sheet over there. Should we take that one off? Do you want Brock and I to do it? Can I help? You think we can handle this?
I don't know. Well, it depends. I don't know whether we're allowed.
Are we allowed?
Obviously don't touch the furniture. But you can take the corners of it and just, carefully lift it up.
I just want to...
Hold on.
All right, I got it. Oops.
Uh-huh. That was the latch I had.
Yeah. And now you have to fold it.
I'm not good at this in my own house, just so you know.
Maybe it's time you
Listen,
learned a new
I know.
skill, Brock.
And you flip it over. Yeah.
When my
getting there.
kids were small, we used to play parachute.
Yeah.
The Wadsworth-Longfellow house in Portland is the most preserved of the houses we visited. It's exactly as it would have been when Henry Wadsworth-Longfellow, 19th century America's most famous poet, lived here as a child and into early adulthood. It's been owned by Maine Historical Society since 1901, when Henry's sister Anne willed it to them. The dark furniture, flowery wallpaper, and gilded grandfather clocks are all still there, just as they were when Longfellow was a child. And now, Vivian and Abby take meticulous care of it to keep it exactly that way for another century or so.
So how neat are your own homes, would you say? Like, is this like, do you get all your cleaning out of your system by working here, or, yeah?
Well, I will say my Saturdays are entirely spent cleaning my house. And unless it's raining, I actually take the rugs out and I go beat them outside. So this actually has fueled my cleaning. And some people that I live with think I'm a little bit crazy.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, I go through. I don't mop all of the time unless, like, I mop about once a month, or when it's really rainy, I'll mop more frequently just because of the mud and stuff. But
you're a clean freak.
Yeah.
The same as for the house, though. I don't want her to mop the house every week, especially with the floor cloth that we have. So it's only as an as needed basis. If it looks like it's been a muddy weekend, then I would have her.
So you're often Vivian, hold your horses.
Yes.
It's very easy with the mop.
I don't think it's asking too much. I think she's fine with it.
Vivian doesn't seem the least bit crazy, but she does seem different from the other historic literary home enthusiasts we've met. She's easily about 40 years younger, and without a doubt, the most fashionable person, with an eye towards style and textiles.
So a little bit of backstory about me. I have a bachelor's in fine arts for fashion and textiles with a focus on historical costuming and reproduction. I am a history nerd at heart. And I annoyed my teachers with this fact. But MHS reached out to Mecca.
That's the Maine Historical Society that reached out to the Maine College of Arts and Design, where Vivian was a student at the time.
Specifically the fashion and the sculpture department, with this paid internship for building mannequins for this exhibit. And my teacher basically tied me to a computer and said, apply to this and get out of my hair. So I did, and I was accepted. So the first thing that I really did for Maine Historical was create. It feels like a million mannequins, but realistically it was
The first half.
It wasn't a million, but close. Vivian made 118 life-sized mannequins. She built them for an exhibit called Northern Threads that was on view in 2022. It's clear that Vivian loves the house and all the stories that come with each and every little object in it. But we don't hear that much about Longfellow the poet when we're waking up the house. His house.
Speaking of Longfellow, back to the poet. So have either of you read Longfellow, and do you have favorites, or are you mostly in it for the house and the costumes?
And the clothes.
And the clothes, yeah. Not the costumes, right. Clothes. The costumes for your mannequin, for the hard bodies.
I'm mostly in it for the house and the collections. I mean, like, yes, I have some Longfellow that I enjoy reading occasionally. I don't have any favorites. I don't talk about it with the guests, really.
Do the guests want to talk about it?
Sometimes. Some of them really do. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I cannot repeat any. I will not recite any. I only know really the titles that are important to this house, outside of like the Rainy Day and, Battle of Lowell's Pond and, obviously there's Paul Revere's Ride and Evangeline and yada yada, but that's about where I start, because I'm not like a Longfellow fanatic.
Yeah.
And I do love other members of the family.
It does sound like you prefer other members of the family.
Yeah, I do.
I'm really getting that sense.
My whole belief on it is like, this is undoubtedly and factually, this was Henry's boyhood home, but he was only here for 14 years. And yes, he did come back, and yes, he did write really important and some of his most famous poems, and his first poem here. But he had other family members, and they were all very important, and they did things for the city. They did, traveled around the world, and
So you basically, Vivian, it sounds like you think Henry's gotten too much credit.
Right.
Henry has a house in Cambridge.
Yeah, so fuck Henry, basically.
Yeah, fuck Henry. But he did write his first published poem in this house, The Battle of Lovell's Pond, that was published in the Portland Gazette in 1820 when he was just 13.
Now, there is a room known as the summer dining room that's down the hall, but it, also known as the rainy day room, because supposedly Henry wrote his poem, The Rainy Day, in it. I love the word supposedly, because unless I have facts and proof that cannot be denied, it's all just what the family has said.
It's an ironclad caveat. Yep.
Yeah, and it's like, it's nice to believe that Henry wrote The Rainy Day in the summer dining room while looking out at the Longfellow garden that his sister lovingly kept, probably on a rainy day, because those happen a lot around here. But
We don't know for sure.
we don't know for sure.
Supposedly. I'm going to just say this all the time now. Yeah,
Brock is
I got a
supposedly
pass.
a writer.
I supposedly teach.
For Vivian, it's Henry's sister Anne who is the most interesting of the Longfellows, the one who lovingly kept up the garden and pretty much everything else around the house.
I mean, running this house was a full-time
What's her first time?
job. She was pretty prominent in Portland, very active in the church life and kind of the social etiquette around the that kind of surrounded families such as the Longfellows, who were by no means richest or in that top wealth bracket, but they did have wealth behind them. They had this house that had been here since
As a wealthy woman, Anne had the luxury to choose not to marry and stay in her childhood home. She lived there for 87 of her 90 years.
In keeping that, and she also was the sister of pretty much the world's most famous poet, and it is actually because of Henry that she donated the house to Maine Historical Society to become a museum, to be able to save his boyhood home, and supposedly...
So Anne wanted to preserve his legacy. She willed it to the Maine Historical Society to preserve after her death in 1901. And that's what we have now. We keep exploring the dark little rooms of the Wadsworth-Longfellow house for a while longer. We see a creepy old toy horse made out of real horsehide and marvel at the Downton Abbey-like bell system that looks like a torture device. Then we let Vivian and Abby get back to their task of waking the house up for another season of school groups and cruise tours. They're all there to check out the home of America's most famous poet, the author of The Courtship of Miles Standish, The Song of Hiawatha, Evangeline, Portland's favorite son, Henry Wadsworth-Longfellow.
Often I think of the beautiful town that is seated by the sea. Often in thought go up and down the pleasant streets of that dear old town, and my youth comes back to me. And a verse of a Lapland song is haunting my memory still. A boy's will is the wind's will, and the thoughts of youth are long, long thoughts.
Longfellow was only 14 when he was sent to Bowdoin College in 1821. The plan was for him to become a lawyer, like his father. But once he was at Bowdoin, he got more interested in literature and writing. He joined the Puccinian Society, a sort of 19th century debate club with a literary focus. A society that still exists today.
And Longfellow is one that really kind of, as a poet of his time, embodied, or at least we like to think embodied, a lot of what the old society was about.
Aidan Sheeran-Hahnel is a Bowdoin College junior and the current president of the Puccinian Society.
It feels like very intertwined with our mission, to the point where when we invite new members into the society, we have a process of declaiming them as new members. We read them 3 stanzas from Longfellow's A Psalm of Life and say that this is kind of, it's very intertwined with what we do here, or it embodies a lot of it.
And we're going to hear that poem, right?
We're not going to hear a Psalm of Life, actually, but maybe we will. Yeah. How about if you give us those 3 stanzas that you like to read to new members?
Sure. This is a Psalm of Life, or at least a selection of a Psalm of Life by Henry Wadsworth-Longfellow. Tell me not in mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream. For the soul is dead that slumbers, and things are not what they seem. Life is real, life is earnest, and the grave is not its goal. Dust thou art, to dust returnest, was not spoken of the soul. Art is long and time is fleeting, and our hearts, though stout and brave, still like muffled drums are beating funeral marches to the grave.
And that works pretty well for new members, and it keeps Longfellow's spirit alive, I guess, is the idea. What is the idea by reading Psalm of Life to everybody like that?
I think it just kind of does exactly what poetry is supposed to do. Like, I read it and I kind of my hair stood up on end, and I was like, wow, this really gets at something that feels deeply familiar and profound.
The Puccinian Society has some, let's say, odd rituals.
One of the more eccentric and well-known traditions of the Puccinian Society is that our members, our members all have what we call noble names, and noble names are names that are given to them at some point in their Puccinian trajectory by the upperclassmen of the society, and these names are historical figures that are since dead and that are supposed to be deeply personal connections for the individual members.
What's yours?
Mine is Cardinal Richelieu, who was the prime minister for King Louis XIII.
That's funny. My main experience with Cardinal Richelieu was in the 3 and 4 Musketeers movies, where he's a force for evil.
Yeah, it's it's certainly a complicated one.
The 3 Musketeers, a truly great film adventure. Your Majesty refers to God?
I refer to Cardinal Richelieu, which is not quite the same thing.
What would your noble name be, Brock?
I can tell you what my ignoble name would be.
What would that be?
I'm not going to tell you.
Come on.
You
gotta
go
have a
first.
name.
You go first.
Like, geez, my noble name would
Cheeseburglar.
Ronald McDonald.
Yeah, that's right. It has to be from some sort of corporate overlord. That should be our, whatever the main public radio corporate overlord would be.
Grimace. I would definitely be Grimace.
Yeah, I like. Which one was Grimace actually?
He was the big purple creature.
I like the actual Hamburglar because he's always skulking around. He's rubbing his hands together.
like Mr. Burns from The Simpsons.
He's a real creep, but a silent one. He never talks. Maybe none of them ever talk.
So the Piscinian Society is a bunch of students sitting around drinking port or brandy or something and debating important philosophical issues. Have I got that right?
It sounds like you've got it right. So I wonder if even like they're drinking port or brandy and not beer or crappy red wine says a lot about the Piscinian Society. They have this sense of like, hey, we're doing this thing that no one does anymore, caring about writers that no one cares about anymore.
But I don't really even think they're caring about writers. I mean, Longfellow was part of the Piscinian Society, and they recite his name when someone new is initiated into the Piscinian Society, but that's the extent of Longfellow's place in the Piscinian Society.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like they're reading his poetry at every one of their meetings, are they?
It's like cult members when they recite Satan's name over and over again. They invoke it.
Longfellow will be turning over in his grave right now, just thinking about that. But it's weird that, okay, so Longfellow's name is on the library. It's part of the Piscinian Society, but other than that, where's Longfellow?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, it's part of the major trouble with him. Our major trouble with him is that he stands for so much, not just at Bowdoin and not just the Piscinian Society, but around Portland too. His name is everywhere. But is his name a kind of thing that's just there because it's always been there and then it doesn't have a kind of relevance anymore? It's a kind of thing where you, like when you look at the wall and there's an ancient relative there and you're like, oh yeah, there's Leonard. Without knowing who Leonard is or not caring.
That's not on my wall. I have no ancient relatives on my wall.
There is a Leonard on your wall. There's a Leonard on everyone's wall.
Well, okay. Longfellow, if he was alive today, would he be a member of today's Piscinian Society at Bowdoin?
I mean, would the man drink brandy? I mean, does he drink the right drink in order to be part of the club?
I mean, I think he does.
Yeah, then yes, he would. I mean, he was always, the thing about the Piscinian Society, this is like the danger of societies in general. They're always so backward looking. I don't think
that's a danger. Why not look backward?
What if the man himself was always looking backward? Don't be. We're not arguing here.
Well, I just mean that the Piscinian Society wants to conserve these traditions.
Uh-huh.
Longfellow's poems were written in a style, traditional style, rhyming about ye old subjects.
Mm-hmm.
And what's wrong with that?
I guess there's nothing, although the ye old part of it is maybe something that might be wrong with it, the sense of nostalgia, the sense that something is important buried in the past. I mean, this is what Longfellow himself was always about as a poet. We have Hiawatha, we have Miles Standish, we have Evangeline. So all of these things are things that he pulls from the past as though the past itself has automatic meaning.
Yeah, to make them part of today, part of our culture and life today. And I think these kids sitting around drinking their port, they're missing tradition. And it's fantastic that Longfellow gives us today these names, Miles Standish, Evangeline, Hiawatha, figures from our past that we would otherwise not know.
Yeah, I don't know what my problem is about the Piscinian Society. It's not the problem with the Piscinian Society. It's the sense of veneration. There's this thing. It sounds as though it's almost like a Harry Potter convention where you have people dressing up. And in some ways diminishes the seriousness of maybe the writing. It's not looking so much as the writing as trying to like evoke the feeling of what it must be like to be in ye old times.
So when I teach Longfellow, my students get really irritated because he's this rich white guy who has everything done for him. His uncle pays the tuition. His uncle pays for him to go to Europe. And then he's writing all these poems about poor people and Hiawatha, indigenous people. And they're irritated by it because it's this, what we call today, cultural appropriation. And they don't want to read Longfellow writing about, of all people, Hiawatha.
Yeah. Do you have the same irritation?
No, I do not. Because I think cultural appropriation rocks and we should do more of it.
Cultural appropriation #1 forever.
Exactly. We love it. It's not just at Bowdoin that the name Longfellow is scattered on buildings and clubs all over the place. In Portland, Maine, there's a Longfellow Square, a Longfellow statue, a Longfellow bar, a Longfellow elementary school, a Longfellow street. I could go on, but what we're really interested in is Longfellow Books, a bookstore at the center of town. We go looking for the bookstore's namesake books on the shelves.
Is it in the main section or is it the poetry section?
It's in the poetry
Wonderful.
section.
Not local author.
Selected poems and the Song of Hiawatha,
So is this, looks like.
illustrated by Frederick Remington.
Wow. Do you have a favorite by him?
By Longfellow? I really like the Courtship of Miles
I do
Standish.
too. What do you like about it?
I just find the story captivating. It's a love triangle.
And Standish is such a jerk, and then he becomes a sheepish jerk.
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't happen that often.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's what I'm surprised it doesn't have more of a life now.
Yeah,
Like-
why do you think it doesn't? I mean,
Was there ever a cartoon made of it or something?
it seems
Was
like it
animated?
would be. It seems like it would be made to be a cartoon because it's easily boiled down. The love triangle.
Yeah, exactly.
You can imagine people in pilgrim wear.
And you would just think that some of Longfellow's characters, like Standish, would be like Rip Van Winkle, where he'd just be kind of in the air. But I don't get that sense of Longfellow's characters, that they become figures, or maybe
No. I have some vague memory as a kid of having a Longfellow something or other being part of like a Thanksgiving celebration. It had nothing to do with, I mean, I'm sure it was the Courtship of Miles Standish, but I think it had nothing to do with what was in there. And just like, hey, people in New England at that time. Yeah.
He is the New England icon. Really? That's mostly. And he's, for me, he's like, I guess this is what he's become, kind of milquetoast. And
Well, he's just a name that gets put on things in Portland, at least now, especially.
We ask Ari Gersen, the owner of Longfellow Books, what he thinks that the name does for his bookstore, a store that has been in his family since 2000, when Ari's late father bought it. It survived through the Amazon years and the .com years and the Borders years and the Barnes & Noble years. And it's still standing, a fixture of Monument Square, downtown Portland's community bookstore.
well, congratulations.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's a huge anniversary, a
It
huge
is.
accomplishment.
Yeah.
I mean, this might sound like a lame question, but how much of that localness, you said before that Longfellow is Portland, how much is having the name Longfellow, do you attribute some of the bookstore's success to that?
No.
No.
I mean,
Honestly.
I honestly, no. I think that there's a small chunk of people who associate Longfellow with Portland. I think that, but I think no. The success of this store is because of its people. It's the staff. I think it's always been that way. I mean, it's really, we've always tried to keep our team as a diverse set of engaged readers that enjoys the process of reading and then sharing. And that's what's critical.
So if you'd kept the Bookland name, if it was called something else, you don't think it
I'm
would have
sure
made
we
much
could
of a
come up with
difference?
some names that would turn people away if we tried.
Like the Portland Bookstore. If it was called the Portland Bookstore, do you think it'd be the same thing? I mean, I'm just kind of wondering about the aura around the name Longfellow.
I don't know. It's a good question.
I kind of like this idea of this one poet being so strongly associated with our city, with Maine's biggest city. I don't think that's really true of other cities. I mean, Paris has so many, or like New York has like Bryant Park, and there's so many different. But Portland is, like you said, Ari, it's Longfellow. That's it. That's our guy.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's limiting rather than...
We should have several.
Yeah, like it just seems like just this
Well,
one
I mean,
guy,
it's
this one
interesting.
grumpy
That's,
guy.
there's that sort of historical bit, but I mean, now you've got a very rich literary community in Portland and the surrounding area.
But we don't have those kinds of...
So you're saying that we need a statue of Brock?
Yeah. I mean,
Is that basically what we're saying?
it's going to be a groundswell. It's going to be a movement that's sort of comes
I just wonder if all
this interview.
all the Longfellow stuff has kind of drowned out other possibilities for writers to make their mark.
Although it sounds like you're saying you think this is this seemed like a more literary, like actively literary city than other cities its size.
I have always felt that Portland is not just in literature, but in general, far more active creatively than it ought to be based on its size. Mm-hmm. It's not. I mean, 60,000 people. Yeah. Maybe it's 100,000 with the surrounding, towns and whatnot. But there's so much going on at any given time in Portland, and it's amazing that the population supports it.
So Ari insists that Longfellow doesn't have much to do with the success of his bookstore. It's his staff that does it. So we walk over to the part of the store, and it's a pretty big section of a wall that's visible as soon as you walk through the door, where they've put all of the staff recommendations.
So this is all stuff that your booksellers have recommended. This comes from them?
This is all bookseller
Except
recommended.
it says Longfellow recommends, not Longfellow Bookstore. Longfellow.
Yeah, so the name gets put at the bottom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Booksellers are funny. Some of them are shy.
Yeah.
But no, these are all tagged with whose recommendation it is.
And you give them free reign. It's up to them. You're not trying to strike any kind of balance of any kind with genre or...
Nope.
Yeah, interesting.
Nope.
Yeah, I think you've struck one anyways, though.
Well, that's what, I mean, if you put together the right group of people, that's what will happen, right?
And so, Tess, what have we learned about the great cultural appropriator Henry Wadsworth-Longfellow?
Not a lot.
That is kind of true. We went to his house and learned that it was really his sister's house.
According to Vivian.
And I'm inclined to agree with Vivian, at least in public. I would not want to mess with her.
She did have a duster. You do not want to mess with a woman armed with a duster.
And then we went to a bookstore named after Longfellow and had a few of his books on the shelves, but otherwise had zero to do with them.
And you have a problem with that?
I have no problem with that.
You think the bookstore would be a better bookstore if it stocked more Longfellow?
I think it's already a great bookstore. I think it'd be a worse bookstore if it stocked more Longfellow.
Because you think Longfellow is a bad poet.
Hey, you're the one who called him milquetoast.
And you're the one who said Longfellow Books would be a worse bookstore if it stocked more Longfellow.
That's because Ari and the gang don't want to stock more Longfellow. They want to stock the books they love.
Longfellow Books and the Longfellow House are only 3 blocks apart, and yet Ari and Vivian have never met. We should put them together. Ari can bring the store's copy of the Song of Hiawatha. Vivian can bring the duster. You have listened to Dead Writers with me, Tess Chicalical.
And me, Brock Clark. Our managing producer and editor is Lisa Bartfai.
Cedric Wilson has created our theme music and mixed the show.
Ella Jones is our web editorial intern.
And a very special thanks to our generous sponsors, Bath Savings, and listeners like you.
You can find more information about the writers, their books, and their houses at our website on mainpublic.org. Thanks for listening.